Before the story begins, I'd like to ask you to subscribe and like. This will help the channel grow. Frozen Silence, Winter Detective Story. The town of North Haven had always believed that ice told the truth. Every winter, when the river thickened and the air sharpened into something that stung the lungs, the town leaned into its cold identity. Ice wasn't just decoration here, it was heritage. Fathers taught sons how to read cracks in frozen water. Mothers warned children which ice could hold weight, and which only pretended to. The Ice Crown Festival was the ultimate expression of that belief. Ice, shaped into beauty, trusted to stand. Detective Eleanor Shaw had grown up watching those sculptures rise year after year. She remembered them from childhood. Translucent arches, frozen animals, entire streets of light carved from river blocks. As a girl, she believed they were indestructible. Now, standing at the edge of the square at 11:41 p.m., she knew better. Snow fell in heavy, steady sheets, thick enough to dull sound. The crowd had already been pushed back behind police tape, their winter coats forming a dark, shifting wall. Phones glowed. Whispers floated like breath. At the center of the square stood the festival centerpiece, a massive ice arch shaped like a clock face, 12 meters tall, its frozen hands locked at midnight. Internal lights cast a soft glow through the ice, making it look almost alive. Inside the arch, suspended in frozen clarity, was a man. Martin Keller's body was positioned unnaturally, knees slightly bent, one arm raised, palm pressed flat against the inner surface of the ice, as if he had tried to push his way out. His mouth was open, teeth visible, lips stained a deep, unnatural red. Blood bloomed beneath the ice at his chest, frozen mid-spread, like a flower that had never finished opening. Eleanor stepped closer, her boots crunching softly. The cold here was different, sharper, amplified by the ice structure itself. She could feel it pressing against her skin, seeping through her gloves. "This wasn't exposure," the medical examiner said quietly beside her. "Core temperature didn't drop fast enough." Eleanor nodded. She already knew. The wound was clean. A single stab, precise, driven deep between ribs. The blood had flowed freely, before the ice sealed it in place, which meant Keller hadn't died inside the sculpture. He had been killed elsewhere, and then placed here. Eleanor lifted her gaze, scanning the sculpture's surface. Tool marks were visible if you knew how to look, faint distortions in the ice, places where heat had been applied to reseal seams. Whoever did this knew ice intimately. Not just how to carve it, how to manipulate it, how to make it hide what it shouldn't. Around them, officers worked quietly. No one raised their voice. The festival music had cut out the moment the scream echoed, leaving behind a ringing silence broken only by wind and falling snow. Keller had been powerful in North Haven. More than wealthy, influential. As owner of North Haven Iceworks, he controlled the quarries, the festival sponsorships, the seasonal jobs that kept half the town afloat through winter. He smiled at ribbon cuttings. He funded school programs. He shook hands with politicians. And now he stood frozen in the middle of town on display. "This is intentional," Eleanor said finally. "He wasn't hidden. He was showcased." The realization settled heavily in her chest. This wasn't a murder meant to disappear into winter. It was meant to be seen. She glanced at the clock hands embedded in the arch. Midnight was less than 20 minutes away. Someone had timed this perfectly, not just the murder, but the reveal. The ice had become an accomplice, preserving the body, delaying discovery until the exact moment the town gathered to celebrate. "Seal the square," Eleanor ordered. "No one leaves. Not yet." Snow continued to fall, already beginning to soften footprints, to erase paths. Winter was doing what it always did. But this time, it had failed to hide the truth. North Haven fell silent faster than Eleanor expected. By midnight, the Ice Crown Festival was officially canceled. Fireworks were grounded. Streetlights dimmed. The square emptied, leaving behind only officers, emergency crews, and the frozen remains of a celebration that would never happen. Eleanor moved through the abandoned festival grounds slowly, cataloging details. Ice sculptures stood like witnesses, elegant, untouched, their internal lights still glowing softly, as if unaware of what had happened beside them. The body remained sealed within the arch for now. Removing it too soon risked destroying evidence. Ice preserved things differently than earth or water. Pressure patterns mattered. Fractures told stories. The first people Eleanor called in were the sculptors. 6 artists had been contracted this year, each assigned specific structures. Each had been given controlled access to tools, heating equipment, and internal lighting systems. Each had signed logs, arrival times, breaks, material usage. They were gathered in a heated tent at the edge of the square, coats still on, faces pale. One by one, Eleanor spoke to them. None denied knowing Keller. All had opinions: admiration, resentment, indifference. Artists and patrons always shared complicated histories. The crucial detail emerged quickly. The arch sculpture had been fully sealed by 7:30 p.m. 4 hours before Keller's body was discovered. Which meant the murder had occurred earlier. Much earlier. Security footage from the surrounding streets showed Keller walking near the riverbank around 3:15 p.m. arguing with someone just out of frame. His body language was sharp, aggressive hands slicing the air. The other figure stood mostly still. Then a snowplow passed. When it cleared, Keller was alone. No further footage captured him alive. Eleanor reviewed Keller's personal effects recovered from inside the sculpture. His phone was dead, battery drained from cold exposure, but records showed it had last been used at 3:22 p.m. In his inner coat pocket, Eleanor found a folded piece of paper, stiff and brittle from freezing. She carefully unfolded it. "You promised it would stay buried." No signature. No date. A threat. Or a reminder. Eleanor stared at the words longer than necessary. Promises buried were rarely metaphorical in towns like North Haven. She walked back toward the arch, examining it again. The lighting system inside the sculpture was subtle low-heat LEDs designed to avoid melting. But the temperature readings showed something else. Micro-adjustments, tiny spikes and drops. Someone had controlled the temperature with precision. Enough to seal a body inside without cracking the structure. That narrowed the field considerably. Not every sculptor understood the engineering behind internal lighting. Not every artist knew how long it took ice to harden under specific conditions. This wasn't artistry. It was logistics. North Haven fell silent faster than Eleanor expected. By midnight, the Ice Crown Festival was officially canceled. Fireworks were grounded. Streetlights dimmed. The square emptied, leaving behind only officers, emergency crews, and the frozen remains of a celebration that would never happen. Eleanor moved through the abandoned festival grounds slowly, cataloging details. Ice sculptures stood like witnesses, elegant, untouched, their internal lights still glowing softly, as if unaware of what had happened beside them. The body remained sealed within the arch for now. Removing it too soon risked destroying evidence. Ice preserved things differently than earth or water. Pressure patterns mattered. Fractures told stories. The first people Eleanor called in were the sculptors. 6 artists had been contracted this year, each assigned specific structures. Each had been given controlled access to tools, heating equipment, and internal lighting systems. Each had signed logs, arrival times, breaks, material usage. They were gathered in a heated tent at the edge of the square, coats still on, faces pale. One by one, Eleanor spoke to them. None denied knowing Keller. All had opinions: admiration, resentment, indifference. Artists and patrons always shared complicated histories. The crucial detail emerged quickly. The arch sculpture had been fully sealed by 7:30 p.m. 4 hours before Keller's body was discovered. which meant the murder had occurred earlier. Much earlier. Security footage from the surrounding streets showed Keller walking near the riverbank around 3:15 p.m. arguing with someone just out of frame. His body language was sharp, aggressive hands slicing the air. The other figure stood mostly still. Then a snowplow passed. When it cleared, Keller was alone. No further footage captured him alive. Eleanor reviewed Keller's personal effects recovered from inside the sculpture. His phone was dead, battery drained from cold exposure, but records showed it had last been used at 3:22 p.m. In his inner coat pocket, Eleanor found a folded piece of paper, stiff and brittle from freezing. She carefully unfolded it. "You promised it would stay buried." No signature. No date. A threat. Or a reminder. Eleanor stared at the words longer than necessary. Promises buried were rarely metaphorical in towns like North Haven. She walked back toward the arch, examining it again. The lighting system inside the sculpture was subtle low-heat LEDs designed to avoid melting. But the temperature readings showed something else. Micro-adjustments, tiny spikes and drops. Someone had controlled the temperature with precision. Enough to seal a body inside without cracking the structure. That narrowed the field considerably. Not every sculptor understood the engineering behind internal lighting. Not every artist knew how long it took ice to harden under specific conditions. This wasn't artistry. It was logistics. The river had not frozen completely that winter. That fact alone bothered Eleanor Shaw more than she liked to admit. North Haven's river was usually sealed under thick ice by mid-December, a smooth white scar running past the town's edge. But this year, warm currents from upstream industry kept long black veins open in the surface, steaming faintly in the cold air like breath escaping from something alive. It was near one of those openings that Martin Keller had been seen arguing on the afternoon of his death. Eleanor stood on the riverbank before dawn, hands buried in her coat pockets, watching divers prepare to enter the water. Snow crunched softly behind her as forensic techs moved equipment into place. The sky was a dull gray, heavy with more snowfall waiting its turn. "Water temperature?" she asked. "Just above freezing," one of the divers replied. "Cold enough to preserve. Cold enough to hide things." That was winter's true talent, Eleanor thought. Preservation. They found the first object less than 5 minutes in. A steel hook, heavy-duty, the kind used to maneuver large ice blocks. It had been cleaned, but not well enough. Fibers clung to the metal. Dark wool. Expensive. Then came the second discovery. A phone. Encased in ice, lodged beneath an overhang of frozen reeds, its screen spiderweb but intact. Keller's phone. The last outgoing call had been made at 3:18 p.m., just minutes before the argument captured on camera. The number belonged to Lena Morozov. Eleanor exhaled slowly. Lena was already known to the investigation, one of the sculptors, fiercely talented, emotionally distant. She had arrived in North Haven only 3 weeks earlier, bringing her own tools, her own ice, her own silence. When Eleanor visited Lena's temporary workshop later that morning, the air inside felt warmer than it should have. Too warm. Ice blocks stood half-melted, water pooling across the concrete floor in reflective sheets. The sculptures were unfinished, faces without eyes, arches without keystones, deliberately abandoned. "You're ruining your work," Eleanor said. Lena didn't look up. "Ice remembers hands," she replied. "I don't want mine remembered." Eleanor showed her the phone. Lena closed her eyes. "Yes," she said. "I met him. I hated him. I told him what he did to my father would never melt away." She spoke calmly, too calmly. But calm didn't mean innocent. "You didn't kill him," Eleanor said. Lena looked up sharply. "No," Eleanor continued. "If you had, you wouldn't have called him. You'd have avoided him. You wanted him afraid." Lena's jaw tightened. Fear was the point. But fear doesn't seal a body inside ice, Eleanor replied. For the first time, Lena hesitated. Someone else had used her tools. Someone who knew how to move ice without cracking it, how to control pressure and temperature. Someone who treated ice not as art, but as containment. Paul Hendricks hated being cold. That was the first thing Eleanor noticed when she entered the logistics trailer behind the festival grounds. Space heaters glowed red at every corner, humming aggressively. Hendricks sat hunched over a console of monitors, wrapped in a thermal vest that still looked insufficient. "You control the freeze," Eleanor said, gesturing at the screens. "Transport schedules. Ice density. Internal lighting heat." Hendricks nodded. "Someone has to. And you signed the quarry inspection reports 10 years ago," she added. His fingers twitched. The old quarry collapse had been ruled an accident. Ice failure. Unpredictable stress fractures. But Eleanor had read the archived drafts, earlier versions that mentioned overloaded cuts, rushed extraction, falsified thickness measurements. Those drafts had vanished. "I didn't kill Keller," Hendricks said quickly. "I just sealed things." He explained it in fragments at first. How Keller came to him after the stabbing, panicked but calculating even while bleeding. How he promised Hendricks protection if he helped. How fear of exposure outweighed everything else. "I controlled the temperature," Hendricks whispered. "I slowed the freeze. Gave him time to position the body. Then I finished it." "But you didn't stab him," Eleanor said. "No," Hendricks swallowed. "That was Lena." Eleanor shook her head. "No. Lena confronted him. She didn't kill him. She left him alive." The realization hit Hendricks like cold water. "Then who?" "The knife came from Keller's own bar," Eleanor said. "Someone who knew his habits. Someone who poured his drinks." Hendricks slumped back in his chair. "Winter doesn't kill people," Eleanor said quietly. "It just gives them time." Outside, the temperature dropped another degree. Lena Morozov returned to the station just before dawn, snow clinging to the hem of her coat like it didn't want to let her go. Detective Eleanor Shaw watched through the observation glass as Lena sat down without being asked. No defiance. No dramatics. Just exhaustion, the kind that comes from carrying something heavy for too long. "I didn't come to deny it," Lena said before Eleanor could speak. "I came because the ice is melting." Eleanor took her time. She poured 2 cups of coffee, slid one across the table, and waited. Silence had always been her sharpest tool. Lena finally continued. 10 years ago, her father had gone into the quarry healthy and come out on a stretcher. Officially, the ice had cracked. Unofficially, everyone knew the truth. Safety limits ignored, pressure warnings dismissed, profits chosen over lives. Martin Keller had signed off on everything. "I watched him give speeches every winter," Lena said, "talking about beauty, purity, transparency." Her fingers tightened around the cup. "Ice remembers pressure. People forget." She described the afternoon by the river in detail, how Keller laughed when she confronted him, how he said the past was frozen and couldn't hurt anyone anymore, how he leaned close and whispered that if she kept digging, her career would disappear just like the inspection reports had. That was when she stabbed him. Not in rage. In precision. "I chose the river because sound doesn't travel in winter," Lena said. "Ice absorbs it." Keller didn't die immediately. He collapsed into the snow, bleeding slowly, silently. Panic hit her then, not regret, but logistics. A dead man in daylight wasn't justice. It was chaos. That's when Paul Hendricks appeared. He had been following Keller, afraid of what Keller might reveal. Afraid of his own role resurfacing. When he saw the body, he understood instantly. This wasn't an accident he could bury with paperwork. It was an opportunity. Hendricks helped transport the body using festival equipment, sleds, tarps, thermal coverings designed to protect ice sculptures from premature melting. He knew exactly how long it would take for blood to freeze. Exactly how much distortion would hide a human shape inside ice. "I didn't help her because I believed in her," Hendricks later told Eleanor. "I helped her because if Keller lived, I was next." The agreement was never spoken aloud. Lena would deliver the truth. Hendricks would hide it in plain sight. By the time Eleanor finished listening, the sun was climbing slowly over North Haven, pale and cold. Lena signed the confession without asking for a lawyer. "I don't want forgiveness," she said quietly. "I want it recorded. I want the story to exist somewhere that can't melt." Eleanor closed the file. Justice, she thought, sometimes arrived frozen, preserved until the world was ready to look at it. New Year's Eve in North Haven ended without sound. No fireworks. No countdown. No music echoing between frozen buildings. The Ice Crown Festival was dismantled piece by piece over the next 2 days. Workers chipped away at sculptures carefully, as if afraid the ice might still be watching. The arch that once held a body came down last. When it finally collapsed, the sound was dull, like something exhaling after holding its breath for too long. Eleanor Shaw stood at the edge of the square as the final truck pulled away. Snow fell lightly now, gentler than before, as if winter itself had softened. The case files were complete. Confessions recorded. Charges filed. But closure felt distant. North Haven returned to routine quickly. Shops reopened, tourists drifted back, children skated on the river as if nothing had happened. Towns like this were good at survival. They learned early how to bury discomfort beneath tradition. Eleanor visited the quarry one last time before leaving town. The site was abandoned, frozen solid, warning signs rusted and half-buried. She stood there for a long moment, listening to the wind scrape across ice walls. The truth, she realized, hadn't been buried here. It had been preserved. Back at the station, she filed her final report and shut off the lights. On her way out, she paused by the window overlooking the square. Workers were already planning next year's festival. New designs, new sponsors, new ice. Different shapes. Same cold. Eleanor pulled her coat tighter and stepped into the night. Some crimes burn bright and vanish. Others wait patiently, frozen beneath the surface, until someone is brave enough to look through the ice. Winter didn't erase them. It kept them intact.